Welcome back to Sika Psychology. Today we're going to talk about weightlifting training. So weightlifting is a simple sport. The sport requires an athlete to move a barbell from the floor to overhead across two specific movement types. One in an unbroken, smooth pull, the other in a two-part movement where the bar comes to a complete stop on the shoulders halfway through. Although this may seem simple and rudimentary, as anyone who has ever trained the snatch or clean and jerk will know, these movements are far from simple. The techniques themselves are complex and require thousands of hours of practice to perfect, and the list of technical minutiae which an athlete must understand is massive. It is for this reason we see weightlifting being so encapsulating for so many amateur athletes. It is the chess to powerlifting's checkers. For those of us who want to scratch the athletic itch, but also strive for a more technical avenue, the snatch and clean and jerk are a phenomenal puzzle to dig our teeth into. At the moment, we see weightlifting athletes coming from a few different areas. Internet interest seems to be a frightfully large proportion of the intakes. People watch videos of Lou, Toma, Ilya, and of course Clarence, and become interested in the activity, then at some point dive into trying the movements for themselves. We also see athletes who come from CrossFit, where they may have had a taste for the lifts and wanted to get more into weightlifting only training. Finally then, we see people coming back from a background in sport where they may have had some time with the barbell and now that they've stopped playing, they want to give it a proper go. What I'm going to talk about today is a rut we see many weightlifters falling into, where they hold back their own progress and really get in their own way. This is not by any means an attack on anyone or a system or even a way of thinking, but rather use it as a cautionary note and a reference point for your own progress. A troubleshooting tool, if you will. The search for your own special technique. Myself and Owen commonly talk about trying to make yourself as close to normal as possible for weightlifting technique. Not to stray off the path of standard convention, don't try anything new or off the walls with your training, and this certainly seems to hold true. But why is it such a bad thing? So firstly, it's normal to want to seek out a more optimal solution. And even more normal than that is to try and emulate what you see your role models doing. Especially when you take into account the higher levels of trait neuroticism which we see being present in weightlifting competitors, this is no surprise. The sport lends itself well to somebody who will be happy to spend large amounts of time analysing minor aspects of their technique and also spending a large amount of time training alone. But this wild goose chase for perfect technique is just that, a wild goose chase. The thing that we consider to be diagnostic of a specific type of technique, like excessive lean back at the top of the snatch, very low hips in the start position, are almost always non-ideal. They are a backward step from the ideal technical model and take us further away from where we need to be. But here's the rub. In some cases, this rearward step will feel better. For those of us with weak legs, having low hips in the start will feel great. For athletes who struggle with posterior strength, during the knee passage, pointing your toes out and knees out excessively will feel good, but it's not. This is band-aid coaching and it's rarely a good solution. The next roadblock to athlete success is usually a fixation with numbers. Now, weightlifting is so attractive to so many of us because it's so objective. It offers a massive breath of fresh air over other, more subjective sports. It's much easier to track your progress in kilos than it is to see progress in your jiu-jitsu game. Weightlifting also offers us an awful lot of control, something which is lacking in a more team sport environment. You can have the best rugby season of your career, be in the best shape, play to the best of your abilities, but your team may still lose every year. This objectivity, which is so attractive in our sport, can oftentimes be too much though. When people sit at certain PR numbers for a number of months or years, they can start to place a level of importance or precedence on that number, which in most cases is unwarranted. Take for example the fictional lifter Timmy, an OG of Sika Stan. Timmy snatched 100 kilos say 3 years ago. To achieve this, he had to commit a large amount of time to training, he had to be diligent with his technique, and he had to be consistent. Since hitting the 100 kilo snatch, he has had some time off lifting, he may have had a few injuries and has now struggled to get back above 90 kilos. Oftentimes in cases where an athlete has a fixation on a previous 1RM number, we see them altering behavioural patterns and technique as they approach these heavier weights. They lack the confidence to go above all numbers because they remember the workload it took to hit the number in the first place, and comparatively, they feel they are not strong enough, fast enough, or even have enough free time to commit to it now. Instead, they spend their life in this kind of weightlifting purgatory. They tread water at submaximal weights and never really push hard, but also never taking a full break from training either. In many cases, these lifters would be better to train only for 16 weeks, push hard, and then have a full break for 8 weeks. They'd probably actually get better results this way. The final rut we see weightlifters falling into is something I like to refer to as the art not sport fallacy. Weightlifting is a super specific sport, right? It requires higher levels of mobility and flexibility than most power sports. It requires more skill than most strength sports, and requires more speed than most high skill or exhibition sports. But many athletes forget that it is a sport. They tend to view it as something different. Once they start training out on their own, they do things like skipping a general warm-up. They substitute mobility work and myofascial release instead of doing a jog or a cycle. And they also tend to lose sight of general physical conditioning and can be seen panting or out of breath as they run upstairs. The traditional model for athletic development holds true for all sports, and I like to imagine it as a pyramid. At the bottom, we have a base of general physical preparedness. This is your aerobic capacity and general work capacity. How fit are you? Would you be able to carry 15 buckets of coal up a small hill into your house, or run 2k to get back to the car if it was raining? Are you in good shape and generally physically healthy? The next layer is strength. This goes on top of general physical preparedness and is the ability for your body to produce force and transfer it effectively. Can you push, pull, row and squat? As there's no point being fit enough to carry all those buckets of coal up the hill if you aren't strong enough to lift them in the first place. Can you put up with all the forces exerted upon you without caving in or becoming injured? Then the next layer up from that is skill, physical literacy or kinesthetic awareness. Whatever you want to call it, this ability to catch, throw, kick, jump, land and spin, this is the next thing we should expect of a full-rounded athlete, and is also the first time we see sport specificity coming into our model. Obviously, a soccer player must kick with a higher degree of skill than a sprinter, and a thrower should have more hand-eye coordination than a high jumper. The final layer, and the pointiest end of that pyramid, is sport-specific skills and sport-specific development. For most of our amateur weightlifters, we see the majority of time being spent at the highest tier. Many will come nowhere close to reaching the standards of physical activity expected for good health, and even fewer will have a level of aerobic fitness that will be expected of an athlete. Now you may say at this point, why would I need to be fit? I just want to lift heavy weights. Well, the unfortunate thing about lifting heavy weights is that you must use your own body to do it. If the body is not physically capable of long training blocks, heavy voluminous sessions, or repeated exposure to high levels of stress, then it won't serve you well. So whether you want to be a Formula 1 car, an off-road racer, or a drift car, all engines must be serviced and have their filters changed regularly. Unfortunately, for many of us, we neglect the fundamental backbone of our athleticism in search of a higher level of specificity, leading to a far higher risk of injury, fatigue, sickness, and regrettably, chronic underachievement. I hope this video was enjoyable for you and that it made you think about your own training and the training of those around you. Now, having said all this, to be fully open and frank, this video isn't some sort of preaching from a higher authority. These errors and pitfalls are known to me because I've fallen into them, or I'm currently trying to haul myself or my athletes out of them. The last thing I'd ever want to do is to discourage anyone or make them feel bad about their training, and this should offer a reference tool for you. A brief look at what may be going awry, and hopefully a warning sign prior to any of these things becoming an issue. We'd love to hear about your experiences down below, and as always, thanks for watching.